Today, we're embarking on a journey that sits right at the fascinating intersection of mystical human experiences and stark clinical pharmacology. We're talking about the psychedelic paradigm and really looking closely at how molecular network resets in the brain are completely shifting the landscape of modern science. What if you could temporarily turn off the part of your brain that creates your ego, allowing completely disconnected neural networks to talk to each other for the first time? Sounds totally like science fiction, right? But, as we're going to see in the data today, this mind-bending psychological effect is actually a very real, measurable biological phenomenon. So, to understand how this all works, we first have to talk about the default mode network, or DMN. You can basically think of the DMN as a highly interconnected network of brain regions that acts as the biological scaffolding of your ego. It requires a ton of metabolic energy, and it's heavily involved in self-referential thought. Basically, it's the part of your brain that creates the whole concept of you. And what the research shows is that when activity in this default mode network sharply drops, the ego temporarily just vanishes. The usual boundaries we experience between ourselves and the outside world dissolve. This temporary silencing of the DMN by certain molecules is what triggers the clinical experience known as ego death or ego dissolution. Now, in a standard, everyday waking state, your brain networks are highly segregated. They're very rigid and compartmentalized. You know, the visual cortex talks mostly to the visual cortex, the motor cortex to the motor cortex. You get the idea. But when classic psychedelics enter the picture, they completely disrupt this functional segregation. The walls come down, the DMN is silenced, and you end up with this hyper-connected, globally integrated brain. Suddenly, neural networks that literally never speak to each other are communicating for the very first time. And we can actually see this happening in the hard data. A massive systematic review and meta-analysis published in Translational Psychiatry takes this incredibly mystical concept of ego dissolution and anchors it right into objective neuroimaging results. The data reveals that psychedelics significantly strengthen between-network functional connectivity, while at the exact same time, they diminish within-network connectivity. So those rigid internal networks break apart and global communication across the entire brain just spikes. It is a fundamental change in how the brain processes reality. Okay, so what's the actual molecular trigger for this massive shift? Well, classic serotonergic psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin, which is the active compound in magic mushrooms, act as agonists on the serotonin 5-HT2A receptors in the human cortex. When they bind to these specific receptors, they cause neurons to fire in these unconstrained, disorganized patterns. One really measurable outcome of this 5-HT2A activation is a strong decrease in what scientists call N170 visual evoked potentials. And why does that matter? Because turning down those N170 potentials disrupts your normal sensory processing. It's fundamentally linked to those profound perceptual alterations you hear about, including audiovisual synesthesia, which is where people might literally see sounds or taste colors, and of course, intense visual hallucinations. To really grasp the therapeutic potential of this network reset, I want you to visualize something with me. Imagine a mountain covered in snow. Over time, as sleds go down this mountain again and again, they carve these deep, rigid tracks right into the snow. Eventually, it doesn't even matter where you start, the sled is always going to get pulled into those same deep tracks and follow the exact same path down. Well, in our brains, severe treatment-resistant depression and trauma act exactly like those deep sled tracks. They form rigid, maladaptive neural circuits that are incredibly hard to break out of. Psychedelics act like a fresh snowfall over the entire mountain. They temporarily fill in all those deep, rigid tracks, completely disrupting the maladaptive circuits and allowing brand new, healthy paths to form. And the biological reality behind that fresh snowfall metaphor is just profound. Research from eLife demonstrates that psilocybin, which is the active metabolite of psilocybin, acts as what scientists call a psychoplastogen. Think about that word, psycho meaning mind, plast meaning molded, and gen meaning producing. These are compounds that foster rapid and persistent neuroplasticity. We are not just talking about a temporary shift in someone's mood here. We are talking about biological evidence showing these molecules promote actual physical rewiring in the brain. They are literally helping to grow new dendritic spines and strengthen synapses in human cortical neurons, fundamentally changing the brain's architecture. Because of this physical rewiring, the clinical results we're seeing right now are just staggering. Get this, 12.0. According to a systematic review in the American Journal of Psychiatric Rehabilitation, in a major randomized clinical trial involving adults with treatment-resistant depression, a single 25 milligram dose of psilocybin produced a massive 12.0-point reduction on the MADRS depression scale at 3 weeks. Compare that to just a 5.4-point reduction for the placebo. We are talking about patients who have failed at least 2 standard antidepressant treatments, suddenly achieving rapid, clinically meaningful symptom relief from just one single administration in a controlled setting.
So, right now, the field of psychiatry is categorizing and utilizing these diverse molecules in a few very specific ways. First up, we've got psilocybin, our 5-HT2A agonist, showing breakthrough efficacy for treatment resistant depression, or TRD. Then we have MDMA. Now, MDMA is classified as an entactogen, so it operates a bit differently, enhancing the release of hormones like oxytocin. It's actually in late stage trials right now, showing remarkable results and helping patients literally no longer meet the diagnostic criteria for severe PTSD. And finally, we have ketamine, which is an NMDA receptor antagonist. Whether it's administered intravenously or intranasally as S-ketamine, it produces incredibly rapid antidepressant effects for TRD, sometimes within hours, though it does generally require ongoing maintenance doses, unlike the classic psychedelics.
Now, look, while the therapeutic potential here is immense, it is absolutely vital we ground this explainer in the documented safety risks. These are incredibly powerful pharmacological agents. And that brings us to a serious medical condition known as HPPD, or hallucinogen persistent perception disorder. It's a rare condition documented in the DSM-5 where a person experiences persistent, distressing visual distortions and perceptual anomalies long after they've completely stopped using the substance. And to be clear, this isn't just a brief flashback. It involves genuine neurological changes in visual processing that can deeply impair a person's everyday life. To put some numbers to it, research, including data from WebMD and psychiatric literature, indicates HPPD affects roughly 4.2 to 4.5% of folks with a history of hallucinogen use. The symptoms can include things like persistent visual snow, trailing after images, halos around objects, and macrophagia, which is an altered perception of size. Clinically, it's broken down into type I, where the visual disturbances are intermittent and usually clear up on their own, and type 2, which is continuous, persistent, and considered by some literature to actually be lifelong. Right now, there is no FDA-approved pharmacological treatment for it. That means the absolute most reliable way to prevent the symptoms from progressing is complete abstinence from all hallucinogens. It's just a really crucial reminder that these paradigm-shifting treatments absolutely require strict, controlled clinical environments. So as we map all these molecular mechanisms out, from the 5-HT2A agonism to the silencing of that ego-driven default mode network, all the way to the physical growth of new neural pathways via psychoplastogens, we really have to ask, are we standing on the precipice of a completely new paradigm in psychiatric medicine? The data certainly suggests a profound shift is underway. I really hope this explainer gave you a clear, structured understanding of the actual science behind it all. Expand your mind with real science. Click that subscribe button right now.